Good afternoon. President Cunningham recently sustained an injury, is unable to be here today. So, as Vice Chair, I will preside in her place. This meeting of the University Senate is now called to order. Item 2 concerns administrative responses to University Senate actions and is presented for information. Item 3 is a list of recent faculty, staff, and student deaths that have been sent for announcement to the Senate. You're invited to observe a moment of silence while I read the names. Betsy Bateman, Clifford Martin III, Terrence Stanley, and Catherine Vasquez. Item 4 is approval of the minutes of the University and Faculty Senate meetings of February 19th, 2026. Does anyone object to approving the minutes? Seeing no objections, this motion is approved by acclamation. Okay. Item 5 is the provost report. Since Provost Ritter is unable to be here, she submitted a written report. I would like to ask people to take a minute to look at her written report because it's pertinent to the discussion that we will have in the Faculty Senate in the hour and a half or so. Okay. Item 6 is the SCC FCC Chairs Report. Professor Leo, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Professor Cohen. So thank you all for coming. There have been several issues discussed by the FCC and SCC this past month. Both groups have discussed a set of rule changes designed to clarify some of the processes of the Senate, and I believe those will come to the Senate in a few minutes. We've met the new UMPD chief, Michael Davis, and we've met with President Cunningham and Provost Ritter. These discussions have been wide-ranging with lots of attention to ICE in the Twin Cities, budget issues, and the continuing discussion of the Regent's position on unit statements. On the budget front, I can report that the FCC and Senate staff are working along with the Senate Committee on Finance and Planning to understand the effect of budget cuts on units, establish metrics for the process, and improve the timetable for decision-making so governance can be better involved in the process. On unit statements, we have heard from the provost about her frequently asked questions as to how the process of deciding on unit statements will work. I know that many people remain unhappy with the Regent's resolution and will not be satisfied with anything less than its repeal. I can report that the Regents seem unmoved by these sentiments. I, for one, appreciate the provost's efforts to be transparent about the implementation of the policy. That brings me to the main topic of today's meeting, revisiting the AF&T Task Force report on non-tenure track faculty and academic freedom. This was brought to the Faculty Senate about a year ago and was tabled after discussion and a request to clarify some of the points and a concern about insufficient consultation. In response, AF&T and the task force put out the statement that was included in the docket. I urge everyone to read both the original task force report as well as the clarifying statement carefully. We will have a discussion later today and a vote at the next meeting in order to give everyone time to read, consider, and consult on these issues. I would like to thank Eric Van Wyk and Gopalan Nadathur for putting together the clarifying statement and for their help and work in going through this process. I would also like to offer my thoughts on this process. One, there is broad agreement that the U can and should professionalize and improve the non-tenure track faculty lines. This is reflected in the TFAPS report that the Senate endorsed last spring, actually reports, since they had one on both P&T faculty and contract faculty, and in the AF&T Task Force report that we're going to discuss later. Two, this is a complicated issue as evidenced by all the different job classes and structures for people doing similar work. It is important that we are all in agreement about what the issues are before we can find good solutions to those issues. Three, in my opinion, bringing everyone under the tenure code is a big deal. There are likely thousands of people that would be affected by this, and we need to make sure that their thoughts are included in whatever we do going forward. Fourth and last, as the unit statement brouhaha shows, that I couldn't think of a better word than brouhaha that I could say out loud. It is absolutely critical to engage and partner with the administration and the regents if we are to make progress on this important issue. While I agree that we have to be deliberate in deciding how and what to do to improve the current system, there is a real risk that if we don't work jointly with the administration and with each other and proceed with open minds, we'll end up with nothing to show for all the effort. I'd like to thank everyone for participating in the discussions today. It's important that we all get our voices heard in whatever we do. And this concludes my report. And I guess you get to ask me questions.
Item 7 is questions for the SCC chair. If you look in your in the chat, you will see a link that Amber put in. But Amber, if you could call on the first person.
I am not seeing any questions yet. I will give it a second.
Come on, senators, you need to ask questions.
I'm the best you can do today. There's no president or provost.
All right. I think we don't have any.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm always available, phleo@umn.edu.
Okay, item 8 is a discussion regarding proposed changes to the University and Faculty Senate Constitution, bylaws, and rules. And I invite Amber Bathke to present this item. And thank you, Amber, for your phonetic name, but I know how to say your name.
Sure thing. It's not the easiest, not the most difficult, but all right, let me get my slides going here. Okay, that's weird. Now I can see. Okay, here we go. All right. So, thank you for this time. Some of you who are in FCC and SCC as well as AF&T may know that this discussion has been ongoing for a while. This was a set of changes, proposed changes that the Senate office had brought earlier this fall to to SCC and FCC for discussion. I guess I'll use my slides so I keep on track of what I'm supposed to say. The reasons were just we went through kind of the whole document with an eye to things that have been confusing over past years, things that weren't clear, and just some things that just weren't aligning with current practice. So we are proposing some changes to language, some tweaks, and a few things here. Most of the changes, which you can see if you link to you click on the link to the whole 172 page or whatever it is document, there are some minor changes that I'm not going to speak to, but I will go over kind of the major proposed changes. So as I mentioned, we did consultation with the FCC and SCC. I've spoken to both of those committees twice. I also spoke to AF&T at their request. The proposals presented here reflect amendments to our original proposals that were made as a result of suggestions and concerns from the above groups. All the changes that I'm presenting here, except for one, which I'll talk about shortly, were unanimously approved by the FCC and SCC. The special meeting provision, which I'll talk about shortly, there was no option to unanimously approve it. It was they were given two options to decide on. So the option I'll be presenting today is the one that the SCC chose. So I'm taking this kind of in chunks, so I'm going to talk about the proposed changes to the Constitution first. These are the ones that are, take the most votes to pass. We need 2/3 of all seated members to make changes to the Constitution. So it is a high bar, as it should be, but we think these are all fairly reasonable things. So there are housekeeping changes related to adding designated seats for Rochester and Duluth to the FCC. So they used to have non-voting seats. And then we made voting seats for Rochester and Duluth med school and pharmacy in the last, I don't know, several years. It was maybe five. Anyway, it was a while ago. But we never updated the number of FCC members in the document from 10 to 12. So that's kind of a housekeeping update that is from something that was approved in the past. Section 4D clarifies which FCC members have voting rights in the Senate. Right now it says elected members, and the changes to voting members, mainly because our vice chair is not an elected member, but is a voting member. So just to clarify that Professor Cohen has voting rights in the Senate. Changes to the University Senate Constitution are the same update to the FCC numbers as above. I'm going to skip to the, well, no, actually that's it. And then the special meeting provision, which I mentioned before. So I have a whole slide on that one separately. And it also has a little bit of fun in it, I think, because Spock is in it. So there's a little bit of background to this, and that is that in 2023, the Senate approved amendments to the Constitution that was proposed by a small working group that was made up of leaders from the various constituencies. And the change at that time was changing it from that 10 members of the Senate could request a special meeting to 10% of the membership could demand a special meeting. There was appetite up for the body to not to have a request to the SCC to call a meeting, but rather, this meeting is called, it's a demand, and it happens. So we made that change, but in the meantime, or in that process, kind of some weird language got introduced, kind of just accidentally, and it's just kind of imprecise, being that at that same time, since we were making a demand, people felt strongly that it should be for the University Senate something that was of interest and of importance to all of the constituencies, so faculty, student, P&A, and civil service. So we implemented this rule that says a written demand for a special meeting shall be effective only if it's made by at least 2 members. And it was meant to say of each constituency of the Senate, but instead it says 2 members of the Faculty Senate, Student Senate, P&A, and Civil Service Senate. Faculty and Student Senate are not a problem because all faculty and all student senators are members of the University Senate, but all P&A and Civil Service Senate members are not. So we've had special meeting demands for the University Senate come through, signed on by people who are not members of the University Senate. It just doesn't make sense. I will say that change was approved by the Senate 147 to 7 at that time. So it was non-controversial. But in trying to correct this kind of weird oversight of the language, there's been a lot of discussion about the solution. So the proposed solution is basically the same, except that it would be if one or more of the constituencies don't have all their seats filled, if less than half of the allotted seats are filled, only one person from that group, so like say there's only 12 civil service senators, for example, which we had for a while, but now we don't, then only one member from that group would have to be included in the call. If it's below 25%, then that constituency can be omitted. So that was the solution. Excuse me, the solution that was proposed, and SCC chose that one over another one that was proposed. And so that is what we are suggesting today. Long talk for one thing. Okay, I'll move on to the bylaws. So this is for committees of the University Senate, SCC, the proposal is to change to a chair-elect model instead of vice chair. So right now we have the vice chair of the FCC and the vice chair of the Senate, which gets confusing. And also both the P&A and Civil Service Senate have chair and chair-elect. Finally, we have functionally our vice chair of the FCC, and SCC is a chair-elect, but we do have a confirmation vote. So anyway, it's just kind of a terminology change to reduce confusion and align with other senates. And then clarify which P&A and civil service members are on the SCC. In the document, it just says 2 members of each, but in practice, it's always been the chair and vice chair, or chair and chair-elect. Faculty Senate bylaws changes. I made a misspelling there. Broaden the parliamentarian eligibility, that's supposed to say, by removing the Faculty Senate eligibility requirement. That is because a couple of things. It is sometimes difficult to find someone who is willing, qualified, and eligible to serve as parliamentarian. And so, broadening that eligibility is a way to make that better. And also, we've had times where our appointed parliamentarian was not able to be here, and so then we had Miriam step in that instance, and we realized that we had to get an exception because of that. And anyway, this is just allowing us a little more flexibility there. Some updates to the FCC charge, again, the chair-elect thing, clarifying that ex officio committee chairs on FCC need only be faculty if that's specified by their own committee. So right now we have the chair of finance and planning who's not faculty member. And so he sits ex officio on FCC. But there's nothing in the finance and planning committee charge saying that chair has to be a faculty member. Increased precision about which campuses are represented. It just says all campuses right now, I think, but because Rochester and most of the Duluth campus are unionized, they don't have seats. Clarify the procedure for Twin Cities nominations, FCC slate nominations from the Senate floor. Clarify the procedure for filling interim FCC seats. So currently it says the FCC shall elect by majority vote. Or no, it says appoint by majority vote, and we propose changing it to elect for clarity. And clarifying the rights of those members. Clarifying that the members of the FCC nominating subcommittee, which we just had to do earlier because some of the FCC chairs or one at least this year, is from a system campus. And so does she serve on the Twin Cities nominating subcommittee? We figured that she could be an ex officio member on that. And so we're just putting that into the documents. And then kind of the same thing with specifying how to fill the Duluth campus medical and pharmacy seat. Right now, there's actually no body that can elect that seat because it's split between those two colleges, but they're both technically part of the Twin Cities. And so there's nobody that can do it. So just the proposal is to have those two groups alternate terms. And both faculties from those two groups have agreed to that solution. A few things in the rules, these are pretty minor, removing the requirement for designated seating areas when we have in-person meetings, and also clarifying that if we happen to be in a space that is smaller than we need, hopefully that would never happen, but if it is, then senators get priority instead of any other, random people who would like to attend. Clarifying that extending the debate for one item doesn't extend the meeting, so there might have to be an additional vote on that. And then clarifying the leave policy for committees, which is that if members are on leave, like sabbatical or family leave or something, for 1 year or less during the first 2 years of their term, they're replaced by temporary appointment. Otherwise, their replacement would just have a new starting over term. And the same thing for the Faculty Senate. So I think that is all I have. I will stop my share here and I guess open up my questions to myself.
I think I opened it up, but it's okay.
Yeah, I might have just meant the document.
So we'll now proceed to discussions, and the link is in the, is it still the one in the chat, Amber?
It's the same one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a question from Chase Krug.
Amber, can you explain to what the second proposal was, so the Senate knows what two proposals were voted on?
Sure. Yep, Chase is referring to the second proposal for the special meeting solution. Um, and that was that 3 out of 4 of the constituencies would need to be represented in any call for a special meeting. I believe, well, I mean, other people could speak to it as well, but especially the staff constituents on SCC felt that that wasn't the right solution. Next, I have, sorry, Michael Dockery, who's faculty.
Mike Dockery, thank you. Faculty Senate member from CFANS. I just have a question about political reappointment. Is it possible to continue with the Senate and participate in all of that while on sabbatical if you so choose?
It is, yep, and people have done that. And next is Ava Von Dasso.
Um, First, are we voting up or down the entire package rather than distinct items?
That's the plan, but not until next meeting.
I see. Okay. So I have a concern about the item concerning the parliamentarian. So I understand that it can be difficult to find somebody to do the job because it requires thorough understanding of Robert's Rules of Order and how the Senate works and so forth. But it does seem to be the way it's described in the documents that were provided in advance. One of the problems raised was that of neutrality. It certainly is appropriate for that the parliamentarian be neutral, as should the chair of the meeting and so forth. But I am not aware of any instance in which a parliamentarian has not been neutral. And so I think that would be a solution in search of a problem. It is also difficult to see how a parliamentarian who might be subject to appointment by the president's office would not be neutral, whereas a parliamentarian who was eligible to be a member of the faculty senate, I think I put that the wrong way around, how an appointee would be neutral, whereas a member of the body would not. And I do have a suggestion that might be considered, inasmuch as one of the motivating factors seems to be the difficulty of finding people who are able and willing to take on that role. And that would be, how about eligible to be a member of the university senate rather than eligible to be a member of the faculty senate? That might be another way to approach the issue if that is the problem, that adequate numbers of people are not available.
Thanks, Ava. I thought of something at oh, okay, yes. So your 2 points about the neutrality requirement in there. And yeah, that was something that was suggested by AF&T if we went with like the most broad definition is to just put it in there that parliamentarians have to be neutral. I kind of am on the fence about that personally as well. It'll be your all decision, because that is, of course, the expectation. And to the other point, I can see your argument certainly about somebody who's hired by the president having a stake in things, but I can also see the argument that a member of the faculty or a member of the university also has a stake in the outcome of Senate discussions. And I can't speak for Miriam, but I think I mean, she has her own consulting business. She doesn't need our contract for you know, so I think there can be arguments on both sides made about the neutrality thing. But I like the suggestion about University Senate. We'll think about it. Laurie?
Jerry, can I respond?
Yes, it's open. Go ahead.
Okay. Eva, thank you for that as well. And I just wanted to just to add on to Amber and clarify that we're really seeking just more opportunity as opposed to less. And there are times that I have been in a bind to find someone to fill in and have had, I'm actually the one who uh, found Miriam because I was looking to find a nationally registered parliamentarian just to help out on occasion. So appreciate that feedback, Eva. And I just wanted to clarify, we want to just provide as many opportunities as opposed to limit them when we get in a crunch like that.
I'll just say one more thing that I completely forgot to say. I meant to is that the faculty senate still has to approve the parliamentarian, whoever is suggested. That's still part of it. So yeah. Next question is Chase Krug.
This is more of a comment, but I would say that the special meeting provision is unworkable in its current form. As one of the few senators that have dealt with how to hold a special session, it's an incredibly what it currently is an incredible amount of work to call a special session, which is reasonable, but the change would actually make it almost impossible to hold a special session under either emergency circumstances or under circumstances where there might be a reason to bring it forward more quickly than the committee process. So I think this should come back to reconsideration to the group in April, and we should vote down this constitutional amendment.
So I don't see anything else in the queue.
Oh,
I
just got
could-
one. Sorry, Jerry, one just popped in like right as you said that.
Oh, okay, yes.
Um,
I did want to add that we're not voting on this at this meeting because Chase said to vote it down, so we won't have a chance to do that yet. So
right. Next up is Shugi Ganeshanathan.
Hi, Sugi Ganeshananthan, CLA faculty senator. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So I think, is it based on what I'm understanding here, 7 PNA or civil service senators could prevent the body from calling a special session, which seems, I don't know, I kind of just want to echo Chase here that this doesn't seem workable to me. It seems like the majority of the Senate could want to consider something and it wouldn't be possible to do so. So that's something that concerns me. And then I also want to echo Ava's question about the parliamentarian. And I think also just as a point of information we as always have senators who are maybe attending after not having been around for a little bit, or maybe are alternates. And I think information about Miriam and when this shift kind of went into place, like some context would be super helpful. And I'm also just curious about, in terms of who pays the parliamentarian's fee, does the FCC control that pot of money? Is it the president's office? I think I still have questions about that, and if there would be a dedicated budget to pay the parliamentarian that the president does not control.
So to your question about the numbers, there's 25 civil service seats. So if there's 12 or fewer, then that would be only one civil service member needed. If it's less than 25%, then they're not required. And Laurie, do you want to maybe might call a friend about the background on the parliamentarian?
Sure. So for a timeline, last spring, when we had our first in-person Senate meeting, I think it was the first one in maybe 5 years. Unfortunately, our parliamentarian Nancy Sims was unable to attend in person. And so I reached out to several former parliamentarians on our campus, none of whom were able or willing to fill in, which meant that I then went to the National Registry of Parliamentarians to locate someone in our area who would be willing. Talked to a couple of those folks, one of them being Marion Simmons, who was willing to fill in, and the Senate office paid that. Miriam continues to be a consultant. So the chair of the Senate, who happens to be the president, also it is within their purview to hire someone to consult with them on especially if they're not an expert in parliamentary procedure. And so Miriam continues to join to provide that feedback. There's not a dedicated pot of money for this, but that's also because this hasn't been a thing until last spring when we had to find someone on short notice to fill in person.
Thank you so much for that. Just a quick follow-up question. So, but I think what's being described here is actually a replacement rather than a consultant, right? So like it's a shift. So I've been at some meetings where Nancy and Miriam have both been present. What a wonderful resource. But that's not what would be occurring here. Am I right?
It is not the plan to do that, but it could happen. And we've asked somebody already next year to serve as parliamentarian who's not, who is eligible for a faculty senate. So
Okay, so just to clarify, if this went into place, the president would be hiring the sole parliamentarian present?
Sorry, Amber, do you want me to respond to that?
sure.
Yeah, if this went in place, it's really more of a fail-safe. So if there were no one who was eligible to faculty senate who was available to serve as parliamentarian, and we had to go outside, that it be someone who's a nationally registered parliamentarian who would serve, but not that that is the first choice. And I guess that's what I meant too about just providing an opportunity if it were needed, as opposed to necessarily changing practice. The way it is right now, they have to be eligible to faculty senate for us to be able to use them.
I see. Thank you.
And I don't know if anyone's watching time on this item, but we've got a few more people in the queue. Next is Nancy Sims, who is our parliamentarian, but who's actually not a senator. Is anyone willing to yield her time?
I yield.
I yield.
Thank you. Nancy, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, I know some of you are aware of why I haven't been as available in the last couple of years, which is that my father's been sick. So, and he passed away last week, but we knew that was coming. Sorry. I promised I was going to quit being a parliamentarian along the way, but I had promised myself that I would try it for 3 years. So this is my 3rd year, and sorry, I like you all, but this is a pain in the ass job. It's really hard to recruit people for it. I really appreciate that aspect of this. I do think that the suggestion to broaden eligibility to university senate members is a really good one. And one of the reasons I think that's a good one is because Future Farmers of America members are people who often have great backgrounds in parliamentary procedure. And so the broadening within university eligibility might open the field to more people with that kind of a background. That's my only real comment on this.
Thanks, Nancy. Next is Daryl Lawrence, who's civil service.
I have to say that I'm disappointed at the tone and thrust of a couple of the questions that have been asked by student and faculty senators in here about the special meetings provision. And my question is to Amber, Lori, Senate staff. If this body chooses to excise the requirement to have P&A and civil service signatures for a special meeting request, and I call into question what a Senate emergency is. I don't think that they should happen that often. How many thousands of people would be disenfranchised by cutting out one or both staff groups? And that can be added to the minutes later. I don't expect you to run a report right now, but I pose that as a question because, frankly, I'm very disappointed that the faculty and student senators, not all of them, but some of them, continue to express a desire to cut out staff from deliberations and consultation. It's been happening this year, and it's been happening for years.
Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, I definitely don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but it would be, I don't know, a total of maybe 14,000 between the two groups, something like that. Okay, so next is going through the constituencies would be Cal Mergendahl, who is a student.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sorry I'm a little crunchy. I'm on my phone right now. So just kind of following up a little bit on what Chase and Shugi and sort of in response, I guess, to what Daryl said. I'm still a little concerned about this special session change provision. I don't think, I would certainly hope there's nobody here who thinks that we should be actively trying to disenfranchise P&A and civil service from deliberations on special meetings, when they should be held, why they should be held, how they should be held. My main concern with the proposal as it stands is I'm less sure that we should be in a position where faculty and students are suddenly required to get a substantially larger number of P&A and civil service representatives than they've required in the past in order to call a special session. We've done a lot of really important work in special sessions over the past year or so. At this point, I want to ensure that P&A and civil service can continue to have a voice. I am less sure that this current proposal is a way forward on that, and I am very reticent to support anything that will make it harder for us to do the important work that we've been doing in special sessions.
I just want to clarify real quick that the 2-member thing that was approved many years ago overwhelmingly. So now we're just clarifying what happens if some of the seats are not filled. Next up is Eric Van Wyk. And Eric, you are an ex officio member of the Senate, so please go ahead and speak. You don't need time yielded.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I guess I was interested in the special session issue as well. So I agree with Daryl that we don't want to be discounting people and cutting people out of these processes. But my experience with this was calling a special session for, I guess, what Perry called the unit statement brouhaha. That's a good phrase for it. Last February, right? And we had to move really quickly. The board was moving fast, and we felt we had to move quickly to respond. And so I think mechanisms that make it, less easy to call these things are not so helpful, because it just takes extra time to do that. When we called that special session, there was an effort to get as many people signed on as possible, because the more people who are co-sponsoring that special session, the stronger sense of purpose it has. And I don't think anyone who calls them looks for the minimum number and charges ahead. You're trying to get as broad participation as you can. But it's nice to sort of get over that hurdle as quickly as possible, so it's going to happen and can move forward. So in respect to getting things done, I think making the process any more difficult is not so helpful, because it could have been a problem last February when we had to move fast on the unit statement stuff. So thanks.
That also leads me to point out that the individual senates can still call, like the faculty senate could have called a meeting, which might have been the most appropriate for that one. So the individual senates can still call without doing the cross constituency thing. Next is Kevin Wendt, who is a P&A member.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Wendt. I am a professional registered parliamentarian with the National Association of Parliamentarians. I can talk to you a little bit about PRPs, like Miriam is. Miriam's a colleague of mine, and she is excellent, and I'm very glad that she's been here, because I also recognize that while I am a PRP and may be able to serve in these kinds of positions, whether I'm eligible for the faculty senate is a gray area, and one of those things where I've never been asked, which is also fine, because again, with the ideas of the neutrality, there may not be, right? I may not accept, because I'm not sure that I can maintain the appearance even of neutrality, because I am a P&A and a rather vocal member of the P&A Senate contingent. The idea here is we're opening it up so it's not restricted to just faculty. I love the idea of it being opened up to anyone in the university senate structure or in governance. That'd be great. But this, I also want to be careful. I thought I maybe heard an implication that this makes it so that when we can't find somebody, it has to be a PRP, it has to be someone from NAP. That's not what it says. It says that it just has to be approved by faculty, which I think is a good protection, right? They still have to be appointed by FCC to be the parliamentarian, whoever it happens to be. I hope it'll be someone who is either credentialed or registered. Registered as NAP, credentialed is our sister organization, the American Institute of Parliamentarians. That would be fantastic, but there aren't that many of us in the state, in the country. It's hard to find them. So I like the idea of opening it up, letting someone who really cares about this, who wants to do it, who believes in it, because whoever is assigned, they need to be neutral. If they are a member of NAP or AIP, they have an ethical duty to maintain neutrality. Even if we're paid by the president or the board, which we usually are, we don't work for the board. We don't work for the president. If you're a parliamentarian, you work for the organization. So that's built into being a credential and a registered parliamentarian. So if we could find one of those, I think that's ideal. But even if we don't, we have the protection that the FCC has to appoint this person. And when we can't, that person's not there or wherever, the president can appoint whoever they want as a parliamentarian. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Where are we on time? Should I take more?
There are more in the queue. We have just a few minutes.
Okay. Next is Karen Sue Tosick, who's faculty.
Hi, thanks. So I want to speak to both issues that have been brought up. One, I appreciate the difficulty of finding the parliamentarian who is qualified and can do it. I like the idea of opening it up to more broadly to university university senate eligibility. In terms of the commitment to neutrality, I think it has to me been kind of unseemly to me to have a second parliamentarian at some meeting sitting right next to the president and whispering with the president, as opposed to sitting in the public, sitting separately and serving the body. It feels like that person is serving the president and not the institution and not the body. So I'll just put that on the table. That has been problematic for me. I think that it's not clear in the language that it's a fail-safe, that we go to an outside person if there isn't somebody available. So I think that language needs to be really explicit. I think the idea of opening it up to the university, and then if somebody isn't available, going to somebody else. And I appreciate the ethical commitment that people have to being neutral. I'm just saying appearances matter, and it has been very uncomfortable for me. It hasn't felt to be not that I have any complaint about the findings that have been made. It's appearances. So that's the one thing. The other thing on the calling special sessions, we are living in a time where there are concerted efforts to constrain speech of all kinds. This is deeply problematic for a university. And so creating any kind of system that constrains our ability to speak, that constrains our ability to talk to each other, is equally deeply problematic. And so if this new...
I'm sorry, the time is up, and that was my error in just putting too much time on the clock, but the 2 minutes is up.
Okay.
Next, we have Dominic Scavullo, a student.
Thanks, Amber. I have a quick clarifying question around the second option that was proposed. Just wondering, it mentioned that if the seats were below 25% capacity, then that constituency could be omitted. It also noted that 3 of 4 were required. So if we ran into a situation where both P&A and civil service or students or whatever constituency, if there were 2 constituencies under 25% filled, how would that work under that option?
sorry, so the 3 out of 4, that was option 2, which was voted down. So that's then nothing to do with it now. So now it would just be the 25%. If all the constituencies are under 25% for some reason, they would all only need one person.
All we need
Or
one.
I'm not, sorry, not under 25%, under 50%.
I'm
If
sorry,
they're all
that's
under
right.
25%, that's
I
bad.
combined those two.
Yeah.
I'm getting all my wires crossed. With that said, I don't have a I don't think any intention on this is to either constrain speech or to specifically single out or ignore any constituent groups. I think it's really it's process management. It's trying to streamline our efforts here. And it's like Lori and Amber have been saying, it's making it so that something that comes to the University Senate is necessary for all groups for the University Senate. We all have our own powers to call our own special meetings of our own constituent groups. And sometimes those issues are better handled in those groups anyway, in my opinion, from what I've seen. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to keep calling on people until someone tells me to stop because I'm not monitoring.
We have time for maybe one more, Amber.
Okay. Next would be Rosemary Burns-Velez, Civil Service.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say that almost the same thing that Dominic said. I wanted clarification that we're not constraining speech by the option that we selected. It's actually a little easier than it has been in the past because you always needed 2 of each constituency. And now if one group is less than 50%, then you only need 1. If they're less than 25, they don't need to be included at all. The objection that Civil Service had to the option 2 was that you could choose to ignore one of the constituencies and not seek out any signatures from that group. And if we're talking about stifling speech, that would stifle the speech of Civil Service, who is often not included in any consultation on any issue in the Senate except for our own. And so we objected to it because we did not want to be the group that was excluded frequently. We are already there, so we're hoping to change that in the future and be consulted earlier in the process than we have been. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate what you said as well.
Okay, with that, since we're at time, I just want to say thank you for everyone for engaging in the discussion. This is how this is how it should work. So appreciate all the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. And I just want to give a my own personal endorsement for both Nancy and Miriam. They're very helpful. I wouldn't want to do this chairing without both of them. They work well together, and they've been very helpful to me throughout this. Okay, item 9 concerns amendments to the administrative policy. University state of emergency human resources implication is presented for information only, which will make it a lot easier than having a long discussion. 10 concerns the university plan to adopt the Okanagan Charter and is presented for information. I think that's a useful thing to read. I think it's a very interesting reading for how one looks at university health issues. And it's not without controversy, so you can, if you Google critiques of it, you get that as well. But I think it's in general has been pretty good. Item 11 is old business, of which there is none. Item 12 concerns new business. Is there any new business? If there is no further business, this concludes our meeting of the University Senate. And we are adjourned. The Faculty Senate will convene at 3:30.
Can I just say that people from other senates are welcome to sit into the Faculty Senate discussion if they are so interested? Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay, I just
Faculty Senate is called to order. First item, item 2 is concerns administrative responses to Faculty Senate actions and is presented for information. Item 3 is a discussion of the AF&T Task Force on Academic Freedom Protections for non-tenure track faculty. I will turn the floor over to Eric Van Wyck and Gopalan Nair to introduce the topic. And we'll also hear from Tony Epst and Daryl Lawrence representing the P&A and Civil Service Senates respectively. And then I think Eric will summarize at the end of that, and then we will move to discussion.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Let me share my slides here a second. So. Yeah, so my name's Eric Van Wyck. I'm the chair of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. I'm here with Gopalan Nathathur, so he's the chair of the task force out of that committee, right? And we're here to talk about the recommendations for protecting academic freedom for non-tenure track faculty. So essentially the report and the recommendations that came out of that task force. So we'll also hear a little bit from Tony Epst and Daryl Lawrence, as Jerry just indicated. So, you might wonder why are we here? Have we talked about this before? And the answer is yes. We're here last April to discuss this topic. And so what's happening with this meeting? So last April when we started on this, there were questions about some of the details in the recommendations and specifically what was going to be voted on. Part of the issue was that the report and the recommendations were done, right? The task force finished that in June of 24. And so any sort of clarifications that came out of that meeting then were not part of what was actually being voted for. And so there was some concern about that. And so what we've done is AF&T has written a new document that is meant to be the basis of a resolution that the Faculty Senate could vote on. Right, and this document then is the thing that should embody these clarifications and address some of the issues that came up in those conversations in the Faculty Senate. It's also informed by conversations we had, Gopalan and I, at the P&A Senate and also the Civil Service Consultative Committee earlier this spring. So that's sort of the context for this. So I'll first sort of say a few words about the report and the recommendations. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and present this on behalf of the committee and of the task force, but Gopalan is here to answer questions as they come up as well. And then, as I mentioned, Tony and Daryl will have some comments as well to make on this topic. So with that, I guess we can sort of refresh our memories a little bit about what is in this report. Right, and so the issues that the task force tried to deal with were ones of academic freedom and its protections for non-tenure track faculty. Right, we know that academic freedom is fundamental to both teaching and research, and part of the challenge here is that the contingency poses a challenge to those protections. Right, and over 40% of the folks in appointments and teaching appointments at the university are in these contingent categories, and so that's sort of a problem. Right, so in November of 2022, this Senate adopted a resolution that led to the creation of this task force. Right, and it was charged with sort of collecting data, understanding the mechanisms for hiring and retention, and developing recommendations to try and strengthen the academic freedom protections for folks in these non-tenure track categories. The task force, it was 6 P&A folks, 6 P&A academic professionals, 5 term faculty members, and 7 tenure track faculty members. Right, so these are all folks who can be elected to the Faculty Senate, and so that was sort of the first approximation as to what it means to be a faculty member. So that seemed like a good audience to try and pull from. There were also 2 ex officio members out of the Provost's office. All right, and this report was submitted, as I mentioned, last June. We talked about this last February and April. And the real goal of that work was to articulate some principles about the issue that would, lay the foundations for future steps that would try and implement particular solutions. So what about the observations from the task force, right? So essentially it observed that the Board of Regents faculty policy on faculty tenure, right, is an excellent policy. It's a good mechanism for providing these academic freedom protections. The problem is it's being sort of compromised or violated in a couple ways, right? The first is that it's really meant to be there for all faculty appointments, but that is not the case, right? So the P&A category is one that is we treat as faculty, but technically are not. They are outside of the tenure code. And then the second issue is one we've heard about before, is term appointments being used in a way that doesn't conform to the policy. So specifically, this is section 3.4. This sort of articulates the ways in which term appointments can be used. The other observation that was important that was made is that the academic freedom protections for long-term term faculty and librarians are also lacking. One thing to pay attention to, right, is that the name of the policy is a little misleading. So it's called the faculty tenure policy, but it also includes non-tenure track positions. So these are the term or contract faculty appointments. And so the name is a little misleading in that regard. Recommendations, right? So fundamentally, it's about paying attention to the policy and respecting it. So the main messages to come out of that is that there's this ambiguity in the definition of faculty, and that should be fixed so that it's clear that all personnel that are doing faculty work should be covered by this policy, right? They should benefit from the academic freedom protections that this policy gives us. Right. And also by the end of the transition period, we want to make sure that all the stipulations of the term appointments are being adhered to. Right. So by the end of addressing the problems, we can be in conformance with what the policy states. Part of what that faculty senate resolution was about is sort of recognize that we can't do all these changes at once. Right. It's going to take time. If we do things too quickly, it will be disruptive, and that's not helpful. Also, the changes have to respect people who've been here a long time, dedicated their careers to the institution. We don't want to do things that disrupt their lives in trying to get our sort of house in order in terms of these policies. Right, and then of course the other recommendation matches the other observations, right? That there should be a way, we need to build policies for better academic freedom protections for these long-term term faculty positions and also for librarians. So we may ask, what does an affirmative vote mean, right? So if we vote on this in April on this document, what does that mean? What it would have meant last April would have been a bit confusing, as I mentioned, because the report was fixed, and so those lingering doubts could not be incorporated into what was actually voted on. And so that's what this new document is meant to address. It's sort of presented as a resolution that the faculty senate can vote on, right? And it points to the recommendations, it's anchored in those recommendations, but it gives a way for the faculty senate's will to be expressed and some of those lingering concerns to be sort of part of what is actually voted on, or answers to those lingering concerns is what is actually voted on. And so this document makes a number of things explicit that were more or less implicit before. One that's very important is that that a positive vote here, right, is really the beginning of a process, right? It's not the end of this discussion. It's only the beginning of sort of the implementation phase. The process that would come next definitely requires cooperation, right, between SCAFA, its subcommittee TFAPs, AF&T, and of course the administration. None of this gets done if we don't work together and work with the administration. This is something Perry pointed out at the beginning, right, that this has to be a cooperative effort. The process also needs lots of consultation with all the affected parties. So people that would be sort of in a position where they get to benefit from the tenure policy need to be consulted and involved in the process. I think the main point to try and make here, right, is that what we've done so far, what the task force has done, is try and establish the principles that faculty should be under the board policy for faculty appointments, all faculty should be, and that, you know, the stipulations in that policy should be adhered to. What comes next with an affirmative vote is dealing with all the practicalities, and that's a difficult process. There's a lot of things to think about. A number of things could be, you know, interesting and complicated, but it doesn't really make sense to sort out all the details if we can't at least agree on the principles to begin with. And so that's, in essence, what the task force has done, is laid out those principles. So what I'd like to sort of do next is then talk about some of those concerns that we've heard and how this new document tries to answer those questions so that they are then the things on which the Faculty Senate will actually vote. The first gets to this sort of definition of what is a faculty member, right? There were concerns about the suggested language in the report as a definition of what a faculty member is, right? And I guess I've sort of alluded to this a few times, is that we want to make sure that all faculty members benefit from the protections afforded by the Board of Regents policies. So the definition of faculty in that policy is really not sufficient because it leaves out an entire category of folks who we treat as faculty, right? So that's the P&A category, right? We can sort of easily identify them as faculty members that should be brought in under this policy. There are other appointments that are not faculty, right? Students, postdocs, and so that's also an easier determination to make. But one thing that's become clear is that it's really hard to make a sharp sort of discipline independent definition of what a faculty member is, right? That's kind of challenging. So that's where the departments have to be part of this work, is to make that kind of identification. But given this sort of confusion, there's a few principles we can sort of rely on, right? That when we think of a faculty member, that position must play a long-term role in the research or education missions of the university, right? The activity that they do, there must be a significant degree of autonomy and independence in their work, right? That they're not working for someone, they are independent in their work, right? And it's the faculty department, it's the faculty in the departments where these appointments are made are really the right place to make some sort of determination of whether or not they are in a faculty role or not in a faculty role. And so item 1 is the one that sort of tries to embed these principles in that document and makes it clear that the Faculty Senate would have to come back and vote on that definition, right, once it's clarified and determined by the task forces that would be created here. So that has to come back to the Senate for more votes. Another thing that Perry alluded to earlier, right, is this need for cooperation, right? I think we all have to buy into that. So the recommendations have a call for 2 task forces, right? One to determine how faculty appointments are brought under the tenure policy, the ones that are not there now, and then how we strengthen academic freedom protections for term faculty and librarians. Those are the 2 task forces. Right, none of this gets done if we don't work with the Board of Regents and the Provost's office and the President's office. And so the plan here is to create these task forces sort of equally between AF&T, SCAFA, and the Provost's office, that everyone gets to contribute to the membership of these task forces. And this is really an opening to do this in a very cooperative way, because as we've said, it has to be done that way. The closing paragraph of this document also points to the Provost's current task force, right, and says that the work going forward should pay attention to what that task force is doing and has done, right? That task force is set to wrap up with its report in May, so that should be done before these get started, and so I think they will dovetail together quite nicely, right? That task force that's currently happening is smaller in scale. So Ola Graham talked about this in the AF&T meeting almost 2 weeks ago, right? That it's mostly administrators, and the reason for that is it's rather technical in nature. There's a fair amount of work of looking at labor law and job codes to try and get some consistency on how the existing roles are carried out. But we think that would naturally feed into what would come next. Another item is this issue of tenure track versus term appointments, right? So the recommendations ask or call for all appointments, all faculty appointments be covered by the tenure policy and the policy to be respected, right? And if we read the tenure code, there's an important sentence in there that says tenure is the keystone to academic freedom. And we know this applies to teaching as well as research. And those in teaching appointments certainly need those protections. Maybe now, these days, more than ever. But we also have to recognize certain practicalities of the world we live in and the situation we're all in. And so those practicalities are what these implementation task forces have to take up. And they may find that there's a need to expand what it means to be a term faculty member that's employed in a term position for a long time. I don't think we can deny that as a possible outcome of all of this process, right? But any of these sort of extensions or expansions should come with appropriate academic freedom protections. Consultation with all those affected. This is clearly important, right? I don't think it's fair or just to make changes to someone's position without having them being very much involved in the process, right? And so this sort of comes in items 2 and 4 about the construction of these task forces and who they work with, right? And in item 6 of that document. So when we think of where these appointments are of all faculty, it's the departments that have to sort of figure this out, right? And some of the folks in these appointments may be represented by the PA&A Senate or the Civil Service Senate. And so items 2 and 4 call explicitly for those senates to be part of this process, right? That they need to be consulted, involved in this work that goes forward. And then item 6 is a really critical one because it gets to the point that we can't be disruptive of people's lives that have been here a long time, right? That this all has to be done in a careful and deliberate way. Faculty Senate involvement. A concern before was, well, if the Faculty Senate voted for those recommendations last year, is that it? The Faculty Senate has no more input and it's all moving forward, right? That's not the case, right? Any affirmative vote that happens now just starts this process, right? It begins dealing with the practical issues. Those task forces have to come back to the Faculty Senate for more votes on the definition of faculty, the transition plans developed by those task forces. All this stuff has to come back through the Faculty Senate again, right? So we do have to work with the administration and the Board of Regents, but these would be task forces that still sit under the Faculty Senate, but with a high degree of cooperation with the rest of the university. Yeah, with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues, Tony and Daryl. So Tony has a few words to say from the PA&A Senate, and then Daryl from the Civil Service Senate. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I think Tony is going to go first here. So.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. Can everyone hear me okay? Looks good. Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Tony Apps. As was mentioned, I'm the current outgoing chair of the PA&A Senate. This last February, the PA&A Senate was consulted on the report being put forward today. The committee chairs, Eric and Gopalan, were also willing to answer a number of questions we had, which was greatly appreciated. However, we were also informed that as the report was finalized in 2024, it could no longer be revised based on our feedback or recommendations at this time. I, along with our consultative committee, have some lingering concerns about the report and how it may be implemented. And as this report was created with PA&A faculty representatives, but without broader consultation of the rest of the PA&A faculty, I've also heard from a number of those individuals who don't feel well represented in the report today. We absolutely agree that academic freedom protection should be available and applied to all those in faculty or faculty-like positions, as well as librarians. But we feel the report is maybe not specific enough about how this will be done. Without more clarity, some feel this opens up an avenue to phase out P&A and other non-tenured faculty positions, apart from that more narrowly defined term faculty designation. This has created a great deal of concern from our constituents. So our specific ask to the task force was to include our recommendations along with the report, but the report was finalized, so that was not possible. Though I will note there was a statement that Eric mentioned that went out today that I'll make mention to. The first recommendation we had was, should this report lead to action, the implementation team will review the faculty tenure policy to determine if it may be extended to include a category beyond term faculty that includes P&A faculty, non-tenured faculty, and librarians. I'll note this is included as a possibility in the statement that now accompanies the report. In point 3, it notes in part that the next task force may propose modifications to the Board of Regents policy, such as an expansion of appropriate conditions for term faculty appointments. Point 2 was if reclassification is, if the reclassification process is undertaken, it should be led by faculty who are not covered under the current tenure policy with oversight from AF&T. We'd also encourage the creation of a working group to study this issue at the national level and make more specific recommendations before forming what would be the implementation team. This could then provide opportunity for all affected groups, such as P&A faculty, and those civil service members who may be affected to be consulted earlier in the process of drafting recommendations. It may also provide the Faculty Senate greater clarity on what they would be approving following this report, though it sounds like there may be a few approvals that have to take place. I'll note that a variation of this with multiple task forces is included in the attached statement, but is perhaps more rigidly defined than we did in our recommendation. I'd like to close by echoing Perry Leo's statements from earlier that this is really complicated work, and we need to be collectively working on this effort across the institution. The provost has a task force working on this issue now, and we look forward to seeing their recommendations as well. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Daryl, you want to have a few things to say, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daryl Lawrence. I am the chair-elect for the Civil Service Senate, and I want to build off of what Tony said and read into record the letter that was sent to the task force following its visit to the Civil Service Consultative Committee. The Civil Service Senate Group has the following concerns. First, the Academic Freedom and Tenure's recent task force report excludes civil service members who are doing faculty-type work. Second, it is unclear why the task force is pursuing reclassification, which increases stratification, rather than addressing the issue of academic freedom at a policy level by expanding academic freedom protections beyond the tenure policy. Third, this process is being led by tenured faculty who are unaware of the scope of work being performed by people in P&A and civil service classifications. Fourth, many of our University of Minnesota civil service constituents in extension, museums, OIT, and libraries are directly engaging with and teaching in Minnesota and university communities. Fifth, many research roles are held by members of the Civil Service staff group. The Civil Service Senate joins with the P&A Senate to encourage the creation of a working group that includes P&A and civil service staff to study this issue at the national level and make more specific recommendations before forming an implementation group. This could then provide an opportunity for all affected groups to be consulted and give feedback before recommendations are drafted. And then we have some standard definitions of faculty-type work that we used in crafting our response. For teaching, involves delivering courses and instruction to students. Research, engaging in academic and scholarly activities, including conducting research and publishing findings. Service, contributing to community engagement and service to the community, often through outreach programs and volunteer work. Scholarship, focusing on academic excellence and the development of knowledge through various forms of scholarship. I yield.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Daryl. Yeah, I think it's really important to hear these concerns. I do think a lot of this should come into play in this next phase where these what are called implementation task forces sort of begin. That's where if we sort of, accept this notion of the principles that faculty should be covered by one policy so they can benefit from the academic freedom protections under that policy. Then the question of how do we do this, right, is where all this very broad consultation just has to happen. And I would expect that those task forces are knocking on the door of civil service and P&A Senate to their annoyance with lots of questions about how we sort of figure out how to go about doing all this. So we'd certainly take those concerns on board. A lot of those had effect on the new statement, this thing that may become a resolution. And then more specific responses to those concerns are in the docket. So if people are interested in what Gopalan and I, how we reacted to those, you can certainly take a look at those there. But we spent a fair amount of time and took those quite seriously. With that, I think I just have one more slide to sort of show here, right? And that's the one that wraps us up before discussion. Just to sort of reiterate some of the key points here, right? So this new document that you'll find in the docket is the one that would be a basis of a resolution that gets voted on by the Faculty Senate. It's here to make explicit a lot of the things that seem to be implicit before. Hopefully this addresses a lot of the concerns that people had. It really tries to make the point that the Faculty Senate isn't done with this after an affirmative vote, if that's what happens. That the plans have to be approved, the definition of faculty has to be approved, and none of those are going to be approved unless they're done in the right way and in a cooperative and consultative manner. Right, so lots of cooperation with the administration. I think that's why this sort of idea of joint setting up of the task forces is important. And yeah, paying attention to all those who are affected and recognizes that these practical considerations may need to be accommodated. And so that's a big part of what would have to happen in the next phase. So, and that happens if we sort of buy into the general principles that are presented in that report from the AF&T task force. So with that, we welcome your questions and comments, and I'll stop sharing my screen now.
So we'll move on to live discussion, and Amber, I assume the same link because it's still there. It's the same link, the Senate Discuss link for people who are interested in commenting, and I suspect we'll have quite a few. And I also would welcome Gopalan and Eric to respond to some of these if there are questions or comments that need response.
All right. First in the queue is actually Molly Benzik, who's P&A, and I understand she has someone who has yielded time to her. So go ahead,
I
Molly.
yield my time to Molly.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. And thank you, Dr. Van Wyk, for your presentation. In principle, I agree with the findings and suggestions that all faculty, researchers, and employees doing mission-specific work should have academic freedom protection. I appreciate that you, Dr. Van Wyk, stated that the title of the policy is misleading, but in practice, it is only enforced upon those it covers, tenured, tenure track, and term faculty, which means the title is still apt and will always be confusing to see academic freedom protection only under a policy related to faculty tenure. I do not think the move to reclassify some positions is the way to handle what is a university policy issue related to academic freedom protection. The university should have a system-wide policy on academic freedom protection that covers all those doing mission-specific work. Librarians are absent from the list in the original AF&T report. I appreciate that it's been added to your presentation today. And the AF&T report only lists the job codes of P&A instructional positions, but does not define what researchers were included in this consideration and in your report. The act of redefining or reclassifying all faculty and research positions should be done separately from discussions or policies related to academic freedom protection. I yield back. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Yeah, we certainly appreciate these sort of concerns. I think part of it boils down to that if there is a policy on faculty appointments, then everyone who's faculty should be benefiting from the protections of that policy. And so if we have these sort of parallel tracks, it tends to sort of degrade the quality of any of them. And it sort of sets up these opportunities for new parallel tracks to be created that don't have the protections that existing tracks have. And so the reclassification from P&A into term faculty is one I don't think is sort of an abrupt move, mostly because a lot of people in term faculty positions and in P&A, administrative academic professional positions, at least in my department, are doing essentially the same job, right? It's just that some of them have one title and some of them have another title. And this
Eric,
is
I
a
have
more
to
stratified system than we really need.
I have to step in and tell you
Yeah,
to be
please.
more
Sorry, Jerry,
concise.
please. Yeah.
Jerry, can I say something?
Quickly.
Yeah. Right. So, Molly's idea that there should be a policy that governs academic freedom for everyone at the university is well taken. However, we should pay attention to the fact that that was not the charge of the task force from the perspective of the faculty senate. Right? The task was limited to faculty. Okay. Academic freedom protections for faculty, non-tenure track faculty in particular.
Amber?
Next up is Emily Pelton.
Hi, is everybody able to hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm Emily Pelton. I'm a faculty senator from CSE. My background, I don't know. I was a graduate student here. I was also in the P&A track, and now I'm in this role, eligible for participation in faculty senate. I had two questions. The first is the document that was listed, like the 2026 statement, is that the resolution upon which we're going to be voting, or is there something else coming? I ask that because I think it's really important that I understand and am able to ask colleagues and constituents, what actually am I voting on? And I would hope that if that's what it is, that's clarified. And if not, there's another resolution coming, that it comes well in advance of when we're asked to vote on it. And then my second question is, what is the goal of asking for a vote? Kind of my sense is at the next meeting, while the provost's task force on term faculty is still ongoing.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Good question. So the document that's there now, this 2026 statement, would be the basis of the resolution, right? So if everyone said, hey, it's great, we love it, that would be the resolution, right? There could be some, modifications to it, but fundamentally that would be the resolution, maybe with some, different, titles and things to make it very clear that it's a resolution, but the content is what would be formed there, right? So that's the idea there, and that would come out well in advance. And then you had another question, which I now have sort of blanked on. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. The other question was, what is the goal of asking for us to vote on this resolution while the provost's task force, which in my sense has some maybe parallel-ish tracks, or is asking to clarify some things that are addressed in that 2026 statement? What's the goal of asking for or for us to approve a resolution on that before that task force has completed its work?
I think it comes down to the fact that the provost task force is much more limited in scope, right? So it really doesn't address these bigger issues that are about reclassification and getting the sort of, everyone who's faculty covered by the Board of Regents policy on faculty. It's pretty technical in nature. So this is what we heard from Ola Graham at the last AF&T meeting, that it was sort of trying to get the system we have working a little better. And what this work is trying to do is change the system, right? Because it recognizes these violations of the tenure policy, and that's not really what that task force is getting into. And so
I'm going to take chair's responsibility and just point out that we're a consultative government body, and so the administration can do whatever they want, but we're going to give our opinion anyway. And then I'm going to jump in, and I think Perry will agree with me to point out that it's our FCC policy that everything's going to come out early before the Senate vote on anything, to give you plenty of time to read it. Perry, you agree?
All of the information that we have should come out. I don't know when the provost task force information is going to come out.
Yeah, that'd be different.
But we have, I think they're here, so we can ask them.
Okay, Amber.
Next up is Nathaniel Mills.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a quick comment and then a question. If you look at the Board of Regents policy governing academic freedom and responsibilities at the university, nowhere in that policy does it state that only faculty have the entitlement or the right to academic freedom, or that they have academic freedom that should be protected. And when we saw this recently, when Roz Siegel's appointment was revoked by the university, AAUP argued that he was entitled to academic freedom protections, even in his role as a center director, separate from his role as a faculty member. So this has come up before. The language of the kinds of work duties that one can perform for the U under the cover of academic freedom does include language that is kind of general about specific to university operations. So, if you look at that policy, it can be easily interpreted as saying that all employees of the university are entitled to academic freedom. And so my question is going to be for Daryl Lawrence. Given that the task force's charge was to investigate among, academic freedom protections among the employees who are currently categorized as faculty, I guess my question then is, you read into record the letter that you sent to Eric and other members of AF&T. Eric and Gopalan had provided responses to the points that you made. And I was just hoping you could maybe at least briefly gloss, your response to those responses, or if you had particular critiques of those responses. Thanks.
I think that we're looking forward to being more involved with the implementation if this is approved. That the limited scope of the original charge is obviously proving to be a tripping point, and that there was obviously, I believe, an error in that. Staff groups were not consulted as part of putting this together. So I think it's important for us that, just like my colleagues in P&A have articulated, that we really focus on more inclusion when it comes to possible implementation and encompassing more, and not just adhering to the limited scope, if that makes sense, of the original charge. That I believe that the definitions have been proven to be somewhat constraining.
Should I go to the next person, Jerry? Next up is Anna Mosser.
Hi, Anna Mosser. I'm a teaching associate professor in biology, and certainly, representing myself and my colleagues, care a lot about this. And what and a lot of us teach classes over long periods of time, and having academic freedom is really important to us. But I believe a lot of us in practice don't really feel like we have it. I mean, we're essentially an at-will appointment. So I wonder if you could just clarify the different levels of academic freedom. It sounds like there are 3 in terms of actual protection. Like there's the tenure track professors, non-tenure track faculty, and then P&A and civil service. So I wonder if you could especially clarify, if you're not under the faculty, like what redress do you currently have if you felt that you were not renewed for academic, in terms of like an infringement of academic freedom.
Could I take that as a first shot, Eric? Yeah. So the Board of Regents policy, which is in a sense mislabeled, is supposed to cover all faculty appointments, right? It professes to provide academic freedom protections for all faculty, right? If they are covered by it. But the protections that it provides for non-tenure track faculty are weak. It's because most of its focus is on procedures, processes, etc., to make sure that there's independence of opinion in evaluation and promotion, etc., for tenure track faculty. but it still builds in some protections for term faculty, contract faculty that are appointed under policy, right? For example, it gives them access to the Senate Judicial Committee, right? The arguments that you can make at the Senate Judicial Committee are a bit more complicated when you're in term appointments, but you still have access to it, right? You can make those arguments. If you're a, so to speak, PNA faculty, right? First thing is that you aren't recognized as faculty under the tenure code, can't be given professorial titles. Beyond that, you don't have access to the Senate Judicial Committee, right? And other things of this sort. So there is really no protection for their academic freedom as such, right? So that's the question is answered only from the perspective of academic freedom protections, right? There are other issues involved as well in these categorizations, right?
That's a good answer, I think.
Thank you.
Amber?
Next up is Mike Eiselman.
Yeah, thanks. I'm an associate professor at the Carlson School of Management. I appreciate all the work that you guys have done on this. I think that's clearly an important issue, and I support the desires and the efforts to extend and expand the scope of academic freedom. I wonder whether doing so by reclassifying and it sounds like broadening the definition of faculty might have other consequences of what faculty do or say. And I think that attacking it more directly of trying to create policy that specifically provides academic freedom or access to those committees that Gopalan was talking about for folks in PNA roles and civil service roles, kind of more directly addresses the issue than trying to bring everybody together under one big umbrella. I'm just curious what other kind of unintended consequences there are, or other rights or responsibilities of faculty would be bestowed on a big group of people under bringing them all under one faculty umbrella. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I don't think we're extending the definition of faculty so much as being more precise, right? We have this sort of funny situation now when we say faculty, do we mean only the people covered by the faculty tenure policy, or do we include the PNA folks in that definition? And there's this weird term of faculty-like that's trying to include them. And it just seems that we should just have an understanding of what faculty is, period, that they're covered by the policy that's meant to cover all faculty. And so I don't think it's extending the definition of faculty as much as it's just clarifying it and, fixing this sort of odd language of faculty-like that we end up having to use in some of these circles, which is an issue. I think if we had a separate sort of parallel policy to cover PNA, it feels like redundant work, and it feels like it would be less effective than just getting our house in order in one policy that covers everyone.
Eric, I don't want to keep cutting you off, but we have a large number of people.
Yeah, please do keep cutting me off. So
Next is Colin Planalp.
Hi, thank you. So I am one of the people who is eligible to serve on the faculty senate, but I'm a PNA staffer. I'm a researcher, and I'm classified as faculty-like. And one challenge that I'm running into is, in this case, I'm not sure where I and so many of my similar colleagues fit in to all of this. There are PNA staff people who are termed faculty one way or another. I have never been termed faculty, even though I'm called faculty-like, and I do research work that is very similar, as you're talking about, to many faculty. So I think we would all benefit by some additional clarity here on the definitions and perhaps some additional discussion about who qualifies as faculty and how those faculty-like researchers, for instance, fit in here. I'd appreciate any thoughts you have there.
I think that's sort of the implementation task force's work, is to get through the nitty-gritty of this. I think we have a sense that we kind of know from, some distance what faculty looks like, and that's just not sort of understood in the policies that we have. And so that's why we have this funny word, faculty like. They are faculty, we call them faculty, but they don't have those titles, and that's a problem.
Well, I think that just gets to some of the messiness here, is that I am called faculty like in some settings, but I'm never called faculty. So how are those people handled? I think that's one of the messy complications here, that if this goes further, will have to be sorted out.
So can I respond? So
Please.
Colin, I think the use of the term faculty like in your case perhaps arises from the fact that your designation is as a academic professional who's doing some work that and I think that's where the problem is. I mean, you might be doing faculty work, right? But it's the designation that is getting in the way, right? Because the tenure code, I call it the tenure code, but it's a faculty tenure policy that I'm talking about. It says that only people employed under its jurisdiction, under its scope, can have professorial titles, right? So the other people who are doing faculty work, we end up calling faculty like. So that's where the confusion comes from. And what the recommendation is saying is that sort that out and recognize anyone who is doing faculty work as faculty. Right?
Okay.
That's what the theme is.
Thank you.
So I think that one of the good things is coming out of this discussion is lots of people are going to read the tenure document from the Board of Regents, which is really good. Amber, you want to continue?
It's exciting reading. Next up is Shanna Waters.
So good afternoon, everybody. I have a couple questions that I'd like to have addressed. So the Provost Task Force, which was created and now includes at least 2 non-tenured track faculty, which I was very happy to see because I do not believe they were there originally. Is this somehow competing against the AF&T report? Because last month I went and tried to find that resolution that Ole Graham and Beth Lewis had been kind of saying had given the charge to somehow restrict, the reasoning why they were no longer hiring contract term faculty into positions was because that resolution stated a strict adherence to the faculty tenure code. But when I went and looked at those resolutions, the only one I could find is 2022 that said, hey, what we want is strict adherence to reporting of faculty, of tenure, non-tenured line faculty, and those types of things. Am I missing something? Was there something? So 2 questions. Is there a competing? And was that an accurate representation of what was being said? Because I feel like these 2 things are just clashing with each other. Can you give me some insights on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. The 2022 resolution only called for strict adherence to the part about reporting, not the whole policy. That's sort of there implicitly in the fact that it also calls for a task force to go off and study the issue, right? That eventually we get to the point where we have strict adherence to everything, but not right square off the bat. With regard to the Provost current task force, it certainly is about the charge that is there on the webpage now, right, doesn't say anything about academic freedom. Ole Graham told, as I mentioned, it seems rather technical in nature, so I don't think they're competing. The document that the provost shared in the University Senate now mentions academic freedom, so I'm not sure if there's some mission creep happening in there or not, but I think if it was wanting to do more, I think what these recommendations provide is a great way to do more, right, in cooperation with the Faculty Senate and its Senate committees. So I hope that the provost sees it in that way, that it is a cooperative effort where we really could work together on this. So,
Ole, did you want to comment on that? I don't want to call on you if you don't want to be called on, but.
I'd be happy to, and of course Beth is here as well. I think, as we mentioned last time, as is plainly stated in the task force recommendation, where it repeatedly talks about the administration, the need for the administration to adhere to Section 3.3 and 3.4. I think when the administration is called to adhere to the tenure policy, yes, it was specifically 3.3, but we can't. The administration can't sort of ignore the policy language. Eric, you often make that point repeatedly. You've done that repeatedly, right? So that was the importance of making sure that we adhered to it. I also know that, and Beth answer that as well, that the provost has been really eager to make sure that there is a possibility, particular as we're sorting these things out, to appoint contract faculty as needed.
Okay, thank you. Amber.
Next up is Beth Hartman.
Hi, thank you. So I am a lecturer in writing studies in the College of Liberal Arts, and I also was a member of the task force, and I wanted to just speak to some of the concerns about representation of non-tenure track faculty on the task force. So I was one of them, and Eric covered some of this already in his presentation, but 11 of 18 of us were non-tenure track. We also had broad representation across colleges and campuses, including the Twin Cities, Duluth, and Rochester campuses. Perhaps goes without saying, but a lot of time and labor and research, including looking at our peer institutions at the national level, went into generating this report. And I would just say, in terms of my experience of being on this task force, there's great care for the concerns of those who are in precarious non-tenure track positions. And there was, it wasn't a kind of top-down tenured faculty sort of effort. It was really collaborative. And again, there were a lot of us on this task force who are in those precarious positions as well. So thank you. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Next is Ron Krebs.
Thank you. And thank you, Eric, and thank you, Gopalan, and the whole task force. I mean, as a former chair of the Senate Judicial Committee, I cannot tell you how many times, and Jerry knows this well, in my years on the Senate Judicial Committee, that we discussed the challenges of those with faculty-like qualities and their status under the tenure code, even though we made in practice every effort to define faculty as broadly as possible in the Senate Judicial Committee, but there was obviously an awkward workaround. I have sort of two questions, if I may. One, if I understood correctly your presentation, Eric, you were suggesting that departments define those who fall into the category of faculty. And I wanted to raise a question about that, because that raises the possibility that we end up, in some ways, in exactly the situation that we are right now, which is that you have people who are performing basically the same job across the university that are being treated differently because their departments seem to define a faculty role differently. So is that potentially reproducing one of the very problems that we've long been aware of and long tried to solve? My second question is, can you give us some sense of your understanding of where the vision of the provost either overlaps with that of the task force report or differs? I know that the provost recently came to AF&T and shared quite a bit here. And can you speak about, if the provost does not want to proceed or is nervous about proceeding reluctant to proceed in the direction you're suggesting? In the spirit of Michael Iselin's question from earlier, what do those who see this as, what are the potential drawbacks or unintended consequences that might follow from including those with P&A with faculty-like responsibilities, by broadening the definition of the faculty. If members of OGC were here, what concerns might they have?
Could I take the first question, Eric? Yeah. So I think there's a misunderstanding there, Ron. It's that if you read the task force report carefully, right, what it says is that this is a process that has to work bottom up. So you have to get information from the departments and so on. In the end, it's going to be a university level decision, right? It's going to be something that the transition or implementation task force will have to reconcile and come up with criteria, right, at the university level, right? So it's not as if, you let someone decide it arbitrarily. There's some basic principles, if you're involved in a long-term mission of the university in its teaching and research missions, right, then you can't be categorized as non-faculty if in fact what you're doing happens to be faculty-like work. So there's some oversight going to be exercised by there will be oversight exercised by the implementation task force. That's the vision that we had in the task force, and that is reflected in the report. But in the end, it has to be a bottom-up process, right? I mean, we have to get that understanding by looking at different departments, the way they look at different disciplines, etc. So that we can't take that away. I mean, that's an important aspect, right? We see that in for example, in the arguments that we have about whether somebody deserves tenure or not. The discipline has to play a role, right? But in the end, it has to be something that has to be reconciled with principles that apply at the university level, right? I'll let Eric take the other question.
Can you remind me real quick, Ron, your other question? I'm sorry.
Sure. It was about where the vision, based on how your discussions with the provost at AF&T, where the vision of the provost seems to overlap with or differ from that expressed in the task force report, and what are the possible, just following up on Michael Iceland's question, possible drawbacks or unintended consequences that would come from pursuing the path that you've laid out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap in the goals, right? The provost made it clear she felt the P&A category was one that she had not seen before at other institutions, and seems a sort of an odd way to split up folks who are in faculty positions. So I think there's a lot of shared vision there of sort of, how everyone comes under one policy, and we call faculty, and have a proper understanding of that. I think there is a difference of opinion on tenure for teaching positions, right? The provost made it clear that she felt one did not need tenure for protections for teaching. The committee feels otherwise. There's 100 years of writing on this from AAUP that doesn't make a distinction between teaching and research as things that require strong protections of one's academic freedom, and tenure is sort of the gold standard for that. Especially now, a lot of the stuff in the news is about teaching that is where people's academic freedoms are being violated.
All right, Eric, we're gonna.
But we understand the practicalities too, right? That's why the implementation task forces would have to take financial considerations, things like that, into account. It's not all sunshine and roses, and we can just make the world the way we want it every time. But we think there should be a path for this, even if it doesn't get applied universally. So.
Sorry, Ron and Eric, but I gotta move on. Because Amber, I think it's Eva that's next.
Yes, next up is Eva Von Dasso.
The first thing I want to say is I move to extend time because I see that there are, I think, 8 people remaining in the queue, and I think it's important to make sure that everybody's got a chance to have their say. So I move to extend time. Do I have a second?
Second.
Amber, you want to?
Jerry, just ask if there's any objection to extending the time.
Is there any objections to extending the time?
Do we need to say how long?
Yes.
Yes.
20 minutes.
I
Any
object.
objection?
20 minutes. Okay, then you take the vote.
Okay, take a vote. Thank you.
Yeah, just give me a sec to get the poll up. I've got one here, but I have a lot of polls. Okay. Okay, it says extend the meeting to an hour. Just pretend it says extend the meeting by 20 minutes.
Is anybody else having trouble clicking?
You sometimes have to wait a moment and then you can click. That's my experience.
All right, I'm gonna give it 5 more seconds.
It's a 2/3.
Yep, it's 2/3. And I'll have to do math because I see there's 3 options. So give me 1 second here. I'm closing the poll. All right, so that's 68 out of 122 votes. That is 55.7%, so not quite there.
Motion fails. So, Eva, you're on for.
Okay, I'm sorry to be last. I see many people, many colleagues who are waiting. I did want to respond to Shauna Waters' question about the resolution from now 4 or 5 years ago. One of the be it further resolved clauses that she was alluding to says, refers to the policy on faculty tenure, that long-term uses of all term faculty appointments be reported annually to that committee, the AF&T committee, and that the spirit of the requirement be honored by extending this requirement to also cover long-term uses of faculty-like appointments in the P&A category. That is a reporting requirement. It doesn't say how people should be classified. I do have a question with regard to civil service staff who do faculty-like work. And I do wish to say, I find it strange to construe as increasing stratification a recommendation that clearly aims to reduce it by eliminating a stark and unfair disparity between those who are categorized as faculty and those who do faculty work without benefiting from that categorization. But my question is to Daryl Lawrence. Can you provide some examples of civil service employees who are engaged in full-time research or teaching? This is an open question because I don't know. I was a member of the task force, and as you noted, we didn't have any civil service members, but we should definitely take people who are civil service into account. And so can you tell me what are some examples of people who have civil service appointments who are doing full-time research or teaching? That's an inclusive or either of the above or both. And I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, great question. And thanks for bringing that up because it's something we've been working on since we had the task force present to our consultative committee. We actually have an inquiry in with OHR, and this is where it gets sticky. It's where things are not fully categorized because it's at position by position level. So we wanted to get those numbers because obviously when you have data, it's a lot easier to work with. And unfortunately with civil service, the data is not available until we go in unit by unit and sometimes position by position to figure out what people's work actually is, if that makes sense. Like description versus what the actual work is. So I can't offer an answer right now, but it is something that we're pursuing to help this out because we realize like, hey, we're saying this, we want to give you examples. It is hard because we want to not give the onesie twosies. We want to give you the full picture because then you can actually work with that sort of stuff. So thanks for bringing it up and giving me the opportunity to say we're still working on it and we're trying to get that information from OHR in as clean a manner as possible.
Okay, thank you.
So Amber, I understand we're out of time for. Could we take time for Beth Lewis from the Provost's office to at least present a quick comment?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Cohen, for calling on me. I just wanted to clarify a few things related to the task force that has been brought up multiple times throughout the meeting. there is portions of it that are technical. That's correct. We've been spending a lot of time looking at the job codes, as well as really understanding the complex policies that we have. But it's also beyond that. We have over 110 people signed up to be in focus groups. And so we've been going through and having our consultation plan finalized, so that we can make good use of the information from the focus groups. And we are also in those focus groups, we'll have information about sort of issues beyond just the technical aspects in regards to what are the governance policies for P&A faculty and teaching professors, teaching faculty. And so I think that there was a point earlier that was brought up about we have lecturers who are doing the same things as teaching faculty in some situations. And that's an example of how our task force is trying to clean up sort of the messiness that's been talked about before. So we are in the middle of really important work that I think can help clarify a lot of the questions that have been brought up today. So just wanted to provide that, and we will be providing a report in May. But again, the work is going to continue after that. It's really going to be a summary of the focus groups, some potential options and potential recommendations, but this is very complicated. Revising policy and looking at different options is going to take some time. And so as was said earlier, we do have contract faculty member and a lecturer on the committee. And so we are hopeful that we can really move forward and make some progress. Thank you.
Well, I think this has been a nice, robust discussion. And okay, item 4 concerns a statement AF&T and SCAFA and is presented for information. Item 5 is old business, for which there is none. Item 6 concerns new business. Is there any new business? There's no further business. This concludes our meeting. And without any further business, we are adjourned.